Elias woke to the sharp buzz of his phone, the kind of sound that meant nothing good. He blinked at the screen, confused, still heavy from the late-night work he carried with him like a second skin. At first, he thought it was another reminder from his calendar or a travel update. But the message sitting at the top was short, rushed, and horrifyingly casual. "We're moving your sister into your house today. Since you're out of town, it's the perfect time to get things settled." Elias stared at the message as if it were written in a foreign language. His parents never asked. They informed. They announced. They pushed. But this went beyond their usual habits. This wasn't a favor, a suggestion, or a request. This was a decision made about his life without him. It felt like a stranger had stepped into his lungs and squeezed. He sat up fast, adrenaline waking him more thoroughly than any alarm. Outside, the city was still rising, lights flickering on, people beginning their routines. But Elias didn't feel part of any of it. His world had narrowed to one text message, a sentence that erased every boundary he had spent years building. He had bought that house with quiet pride. After years of working 2 jobs, saving every cent, and watching his life shift slowly into stability. The little blue house with the white trim and the creaky porch was the first thing that truly belonged to him. It wasn't big, but it was safe, calm, and his. He had painted the office walls himself, installed shelves in the kitchen, even learned how to fix the loose tiles in the bathroom. Every inch of it held the weight of his effort, and now his parents had decided his sister needed it more. Maren brilliant, unpredictable, drifting from one small disaster to another. She wasn't cruel, just careless. She had a way of sliding into problems and letting everyone else clean up the pieces. Elias had been one of those people for far too long. He felt a familiar heaviness, the old tug of responsibility he thought he had escaped. But then another feeling rose beneath it, hotter, sharper. Something new. Something he had seen in other people, but rarely in himself. Anger. The quiet, controlled kind that didn't make noise, but pushed every breath out of his chest. He grabbed his jacket and stuffed his things into his bag, barely aware of what he was doing. He had a flight that afternoon, scheduled at a comfortable pace, but suddenly comfort didn't matter. Getting home mattered. He called the airline, voice steady despite the storm inside him. Within minutes, he was on an earlier flight. It felt strange, like he was watching himself from far away. Every action came quick, almost automatic. Move. Pack. Go. When he climbed into the rideshare, he forced himself to breathe. The car hummed around him, soft music playing through the speakers. The driver said something cheerful, but Elias only nodded, fingers tight around his phone. He had to know exactly what was happening, what they were doing, how far they had gone. With a swipe, he opened the security app connected to the cameras in his home. He had installed them last year, not out of fear, but for peace of mind. At the time, he hadn't imagined he'd use them like this. The screen loaded. His living room appeared, grainy but clear enough. And then his mother stepped through the front door, holding a box with Maren's name scrawled across the side. Elias felt a jolt, sharp and cold. He watched the door swing open wider, his father carrying another box. Maren followed closely, her head lowered, her hands tucked into her sleeves. She didn't look excited or triumphant or eager. If anything, she looked uneasy, maybe guilty. But she was still there, still letting it happen. His parents moved through the house with the casual confidence of people who believed they were doing something kind, helpful, even noble. His mother set a box on the couch, dusted off her hands, and glanced around as if she was surveying her own living room. His father walked toward the hallway, pushing open doors like an inspector. Elias's stomach tightened when they reached his bedroom. His mother lifted her hand, turning the knob. The camera angle shifted automatically, following movement as she stepped inside. Elias leaned forward, breath stuck in his throat. She was touching his things, his books, his clothes, the sweater his friend had knitted for him. She spoke to his father, smiling, saying something he couldn't hear. And just like that, her smile broke something inside him. Not because she was cruel, but because she wasn't. She genuinely believed this was fine, natural, expected. In her mind, she wasn't crossing a line. She was adjusting her son's life as she had always done. His father gestured toward the office. A few seconds later, he opened the door, revealing Ilias's computer, his carefully organized desk, the shelves lined with notes and files. Elias watched his father scan the room like he was deciding what could be moved or replaced. Maren appeared behind them, hovering in the doorway. Her eyes flicked from the desk to the floor, then to her parents. She didn't smile. She didn't protest. She just let it unfold, as if this were all out of her hands. Elias felt his jaw tighten. He had spent years learning how to stand upright in his own life, how to make decisions without their steady pressure. And now, in one morning, they were pulling him back into old patterns, rewriting his boundaries without a second thought. But he wasn't the same person he used to be. His hand trembled as he locked his phone and set it face down on his leg. His pulse echoed in his ears, loud and steady. He wasn't powerless. Not anymore. And he wasn't going to be silent this time. He thought back to every conversation where he had tried to draw lines gently, hoping they would listen. Every time his parents spoke over him. Every time they dismissed his concerns with, "We're only trying to help." Every time they assumed his life was an extension of theirs. This wasn't help. This was control. As the car moved across the bridge, toward the airport. Sunlight flashed off the water below. Elias's reflection stared back at him from the window, tired, tense, but focused. He didn't feel helpless. He felt awake. He checked his phone again. His mother was now unpacking a box in the hallway. His father was rolling a suitcase into the guest room. Maren stood still, holding a small stack of books against her chest. Her fingers were shaking. It didn't matter. They were all in his home. Without his permission. Without hesitation. They thought he was far away. Hours from returning. Unaware and unreachable. They thought they had all the time they needed. But Elias had changed his flight. They didn't know he was watching. And they didn't know he was coming back. Early. He didn't know yet what he would say or how he would confront them. The words were still forming, raw and unsettled. But one thing was clear. The old version of him, the quiet son who let things happen, was gone. What replaced him wasn't harsh or cruel. It was steady, cold, certain. This time he would stand his ground. This time he would decide what happened to his home, his future. The car turned into the airport drop-off lane. Elias stepped out, slinging the strap of his bag over his shoulder. The air was sharp, busy with the sound of rolling suitcases and flight announcements. He didn't rush, but every step felt charge. He wasn't going home to take back his house. He was going home to take back himself. And for the first time that morning, the anger inside him shifted into something clearer, something almost like resolve. His parents believed they had acted out of love. His sister believed she had no other option. But whether their reasons were good or not, their actions had crossed a line. And Elias was done pretending he didn't see it. As Elias sat in the airport lounge, his backpack at his feet, his hands shaking slightly as he held his phone. The noise around him felt distant, people laughing, rolling suitcases, calling relatives, rushing for their gates. None of it reached him. His mind was fixed on one thing: the images he had seen on the security cameras. His family, smiling and carrying boxes, as if moving someone into his home was the most natural thing in the world. He tried to calm himself, but his thoughts kept racing. The shock from the morning had turned into something heavier. Something he didn't want to name, but felt growing inside him. Not rage, exactly. Not sadness either. It was a twisted mix of both hurt wrapped in anger. Anger wrapped in disappointment. He had always tried to be patient. He had always tried to understand his parents' perspective. They had raised him with good intentions, but their idea of love was tangled with control. They rarely listened to what he wanted. They assumed. They decided. They moved things, his choices like pieces on a board they believed they owned. He had spent years trying to explain boundaries gently, but gentleness had never worked with them. They believed their way was the correct way, and anything else was just stubbornness. Today proved that more clearly than any conversation ever had. Elias pulled out his notebook, the one he used for work, plans, ideas. But now he opened it to an empty page and stared at it. For the first time in his life, he wasn't planning a project or a schedule. He was planning how to protect himself from his own family. He drew a line down the middle of the page. On one side he wrote, "Let it go." On the other side, "Take action." He tapped his pen against the page, thinking fast. If he let it go, things would continue the way they always had. His mother would rearrange his kitchen. His father would make decisions about his yard. Marin would drift into his home like a quiet storm, and he would end up supporting her again, not because he wanted to, but because he didn't know how to say no strongly enough. But taking action, that meant something different. It meant confronting them for real. Not with polite words. Not with careful explanations they brushed off, but with firm boundaries they couldn't ignore. The thought scared him. He had never raised his voice at them. He had never stood his ground without softening the edges. But this betrayal had crossed a line so deeply that something inside him had shifted. He couldn't go back to who he was before this morning. He opened the camera feed again. His mother was now sorting through a drawer in the hallway. She looked comfortable, humming a tune he recognized from childhood. His father was carrying a box labeled Marin's Clothes toward the guest room, speaking with casual ease. They weren't villains in their own minds, they were confident, content, maybe even proud. That made it worse. It wasn't malice. It was certainty. The certainty that they knew what was best for him. The certainty that he would accept whatever they decided. The certainty that his life was still theirs to shape. Marin appeared on screen, standing in the doorway of the office, holding a blanket. She hesitated, then stepped inside slowly. Her face was soft, unsure. She wasn't trying to claim the room. She was trying not to be a burden. Elias recognized that Marin always carried guilt underneath her mistakes, but she still let others fix them. He watched her for a long moment, trying to understand. Part of him felt empathy. Another part felt exhausted. She wasn't trying to hurt him, but she wasn't stopping the hurt either. He closed the feed, leaned back in the chair, and ran a hand over his face. His emotions were pulling him in two directions. One side of him wanted to walk away from the situation, pretend it didn't matter, let his parents do what they wanted. That was the old him, the quiet, agreeable version who kept peace at the cost of his own comfort. The other side wanted to make them understand, not through anger or revenge that caused damage, but through consequences that forced them to see him as an adult, not a child they could manage. He thought of his house, the shelves he installed, the furniture he chose, the nights he stayed up late finishing paperwork at the kitchen table. He thought of how hard he had worked to build a peaceful space where he could breathe. And now that space was being rearranged, redefined, repurposed without his permission. The frustration grew, rising like heat in his chest. He wrote in his notebook, "They need to feel the boundary. Not punishment. Not cruelty. Just reality. But how?" His mind darted between ideas, chasing possibilities fast. He imagined locking the doors. He imagined calling them and demanding they leave immediately. He imagined arriving home and confronting them while they stood among the boxes, surprised and cornered. But each scene felt either too harsh or too weak. He didn't want to explode. He didn't want to scare them. He wanted clarity, clear lines, clear consequences. Something they could not ignore, something that would stay with them. He closed the notebook and sat for a moment, thinking deeply. His whole life, he had been taught that family sacrifices for each other without question. But no one had ever asked what the sacrifice cost him. No one had ever stopped to ask if he wanted to be the one holding everything together. His desire for revenge wasn't about hurting them. It wasn't about anger for the sake of anger. It was about balance. For once in his life, he wanted them to feel the weight of taking without asking. He opened the notebook again and wrote, "Revenge equals clarity." Those two words settled into his mind, steady and clean. He didn't want revenge that ruined lives. He wanted revenge that revealed truth. He wanted them to look at him and finally see an adult with autonomy, not a son who would always accept whatever they decided. The thought grounded him. It made him breathe easier. The boarding announcement came over the speakers, and Elias stood quickly, slipping the notebook back into his bag. He walked toward the gate with a new sense of purpose. Not anger, not fear, something else. Resolve. When he reached his seat on the plane, he pulled out his phone again. He watched the camera feed one more time. His parents were laughing at something his father said. Marin sat on the couch, hugging her knees, glancing around the room as if waiting for someone to tell her she didn't belong. For a brief second, Elias felt the familiar pull of sympathy. Then, slowly, he felt the opposing force of self-respect rise up and steady him. He loved them. That love had limits. And for the first time, he was willing to enforce them. He imagined the moment he would walk through his front door. His parents would freeze. Marin would look away. The room would go silent. And he would have the chance finally to speak without being interrupted, without being dismissed. He didn't know what words he would use. He didn't know exactly how they would react. But he knew what he wanted them to understand. He had a right to his own home. He had a right to make his own decisions. He had a right to be respected. If revenge meant saying those truths with strength, then he was ready. The plane began to move, the engines humming beneath him. Elias closed his eyes, letting the vibrations settle through his body. He pictured his home filled with boxes. He pictured his parents acting with full confidence that he would accept this. And he pictured himself standing in the middle of his living room, drawing a line that should have existed years ago. The desire for revenge was not a flame anymore. It was a steady, controlled fire burning at the center of his chest. It pushed him toward clarity, pushed him toward a moment he could no longer avoid. He opened his eyes and stared straight ahead. He wasn't going home to cause chaos. He wasn't going home to punish anyone. He was going home to face the truth. The truth about his parents. The truth about Marin. The truth about himself. The taxi stopped in front of Elias's house just after noon. The sun bright, the street quiet. Everything looked the same. The trimmed lawn, the little porch, the curtains he chose himself. But Elias felt none of the warmth he used to feel when coming home. His chest tightened. Somewhere inside that house, his parents were settling Marin into a life that wasn't theirs to shape. He paid the driver and stepped out slowly, his hand wrapped around the strap of his bag. His heart beat fast, not from fear but from anticipation. Every step up the walkway felt heavier, sharper. more real. The air smelled like fresh-cut grass, but he barely noticed. His mind was locked on one thing. The moment he opened the door. He didn't knock. He didn't hesitate. He turned the handle and walked inside. The house fell silent in an instant. His mother stood in the hallway, holding a folded blanket. His father froze with a toolbox in his hands. Marin sat on the couch surrounded by open boxes. Her shoulders hunched, eyes wide. For a long second, no one spoke. Elias stood there, breathing hard, dust from the road still clinging to his jacket. His parents looked stunned, guilty, and confused all at once. Marin's expression flickered between relief and fear. His mother finally whispered, "You weren't supposed to be home yet." Elias closed the door behind him, calm but firm. "I changed my flight." A thick silence filled the room. His father cleared his throat, trying to regain control. "We thought you'd be back tonight. We didn't want to bother you with the move." Elias felt something inside him shift. Not anger, not panic, but a clean, steady resolve. "You didn't tell me," he said simply. "You didn't ask. You just came in." His mother stepped forward, hands raised as if smoothing the air. "We meant well, Elias. Your sister needs support. She needs a fresh start. She needs a place to stay." Elias cut in. "And you chose mine without asking me?" His voice wasn't loud, but it hit them harder than shouting would have. His mother blinked. His father lowered the toolbox slowly. Marin pulled her knees toward her chest, shrinking into herself. Elias walked further into the room, each step steady, almost slow. The boxes were everywhere: his hallway, his living room, his office door slightly open with a suitcase near it. His home had been turned upside down in a matter of hours, and none of it had been done with him in mind. His father tried again. "Son, you know your sister is struggling. We thought we were doing what's best for the family. We thought you'd understand." Elias looked at him, feeling a sting in his chest, not from their words, but from the memory of every time they had said something similar. Every time they believed he would simply accept their decisions without question. Every time they assumed he didn't have a life separate from theirs. "You didn't think about me," Elias said. "You thought about what you wanted. You thought about what Marin needed. But not once did you think about what I need." His mother frowned softly. "Honey, we've always been a close family. We help each other." "We do," Elias said. "But helping someone doesn't mean taking things from someone else." Marin lifted her head slightly, her voice small. "Eli, I'm sorry. I didn't ask them to do it this way. I didn't ask them to move my stuff into your house." Elias turned to her. "Did you tell them not to?" She hesitated. I didn't know what to say." And there it was. The familiar pattern. Marin caught in her own chaos, their parents rushing in to fix things, and Elias swept into the responsibility without even being asked. He rubbed his hands together, grounding himself. He wasn't here to yell. He wasn't here to storm. He was here to draw a line they couldn't pretend didn't exist. "I watched everything happen," Elias said. "I saw you on the cameras. I saw you going into my bedroom. I saw you move my things. You acted like I didn't matter." His mother's face went pale. His father looked away. Marin hugged herself as if trying to disappear. "What did you expect us to do?" His father asked softly. "Let your sister struggle when you have space to help." Elias shook his head. "Ask me. That's what I expected. Talk to me. Respect me enough to involve me in decisions about my own life." His mother reached for him, but he stepped back. Not harshly, just firmly. "I'm not angry because of Marin," he said. "I'm angry because you treated my home like it belonged to you." His parents exchanged a glance. A quiet, uneasy realization settled over them. They hadn't seen it that way. They had acted out of old habits from years when Elias relied on them. They hadn't adapted to the man he became. His father cleared his throat. "We didn't mean to overstep." "You did," Elias replied. "But it's not too late to fix it." His mother swallowed hard. "What do you want us to do?" This was the moment. The moment he had imagined on the plane. The moment he had weighed over and over. He had two choices: strike with revenge or stand with clarity. Revenge meant telling them to pack everything and leave immediately. Revenge meant cutting ties, slamming doors, forcing them to feel the same shock he felt this morning. Revenge would satisfy something raw inside him, but only for a moment. Clarity meant something harder, something deeper, something lasting. Elias took a breath. "You're all going to leave today," he said gently but firmly. "I need my home back. And we need new rules. Real boundaries." His mother pressed a hand to her mouth. His father nodded slowly, understanding more than he wanted to admit. Marin lowered her head, shame washing over her. "But," Elias added, softening just a little, "we're going to talk after this. Not with anger. Not with pressure. We're going to talk like adults. I want you to understand how this affected me." His mother's eyes filled with tears. "We didn't know you felt this way. You never let me tell you," he replied. "Now I'm telling you." His father let out a long, tired breath. "We'll pack everything up." They moved around the house with a different energy now, quiet, thoughtful, slower. They weren't rushing or laughing or acting like they owned the place. They were respectful, stepping carefully, avoiding his things. Elias stood in the living room watching them work. He didn't feel triumph. He didn't feel pleasure. The desire for revenge that had burned inside him earlier had cooled into something steadier. He didn't want them to hurt. He wanted them to understand that he mattered. Marin approached him shyly. "Eli, I really didn't want this to happen like this. I should have told them to ask you." Elias looked at her, seeing the fear and exhaustion in her eyes. "I know you didn't mean to hurt me," he said, "but you still went along with it." She nodded slowly. "I'm sorry." He believed her, but apology wasn't enough anymore. She had a responsibility too. She couldn't depend on him every time her life fell apart. As the last box was carried out to the car, his parents stood near the front door, unsure if they should hug him or give him space. His mother whispered, "We love you." "I know," Elias said, "but love doesn't make everything okay." His father nodded slowly, humbled. "We'll do better." Elias didn't promise anything in return. He just held the door for them, calm and steady. They stepped outside, carrying the weight of what happened. When the door closed behind them, the house fell quiet again. Elias leaned against the wood, letting out a long breath he had been carrying since dawn. The room around him was still messy, still full of displaced things, but it felt different now. It felt like his home again. He walked through each room slowly, taking in the changes, taking in the calm. His heart felt heavy, but also lighter in a strange way. Revenge hadn't brought him peace, but standing his ground had. He sat down on the couch and